Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel. In this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous night at the local time. Very interesting details and updates are coming from Avdiivka and Donetsk directions. Let's talk first of all about Krasnohorivka. If you remember, during the previous days we talked a lot about the Russian progress in the southern part, the clashes in the residential area, of course for now without any geolocations confirmations or something like this, but the Russians continue offensive, and today they published additional video. To be more precise, the Ukrainians published the video of Russian attack on the Ukrainian side of the railways. The Russians managed to concentrate significant, very big armored fist. This is the armored fist, and after that they crossed the railways and attacked the Ukrainian positions in the southeastern part of the stronghold. Currently we don't know for sure whether the Russians managed to achieve some results or to establish control over the trenches and the shelters or the strongholds, but we see that the attack took place, and for now we obviously will not receive anything. We need to wait additional time because first of all this video was published by the Ukrainian sources, so it's a sort of propaganda, sort of video where we can find just the losses among the Russians. But if we return back to the map, we're going to see that the Russians were attacking something like this. First they were moving along the railways, then they enter the fields and start moving in this direction. So this is basically the edge geolocation that we managed to find on the video, but the video is very fresh. Maybe some other geolocators, mappers will be able to get additional coordinates and will update their maps. So what can we say for sure? That the Russians during the previous days established control over this territory as well. Very likely the Russians established complete control over the southern part, over this residential area as well, and now the Russians were moving something like this. And you know that this is a logical attack, because if we increase the numbers of days, let's say since the beginning of March, I'll remind you, we will see that if you remember during the previous days the Russians were concentrated their fire in this high-rise building area. I believe we remember these videos with FAB strikes. Once again, let's take a look at them. This is FAB 1500. As a result of strike, another Ukrainian position was reduced to ruins. The position that Ukrainians from high-rise building were using to stop and slow down the Russians during possible attack through the fields that the Russians attacked during the previous few days. And for example, in this video we can see the Ukrainian anti-tank position, anti-tank let's say equipment, let's say established on the let's say top floor of the high-rise building. This is it, and as a result of artillery strike, this anti-tank missile, anti-tank equipment also was destroyed. So once again, during the previous days the Russians mainly were concentrated in this part of Krasnohorivka with the purpose to suppress the Ukrainian positions, anti-tank positions, sniper positions, eye positions, and after they managed to do this, they conducted an offensive operation. So let's wait for details, let's wait for more updates, and there are not like many chances, but very likely the Russians managed to improve their positions on this direction as well. Now we are moving to Avdiivka area. We have additional progress. If you remember, yesterday we did talk that the Russians, after a very short operational pause, renewed their attempts to attack the Ukrainian positions, and we have the first geolocations, let's say, on the Ukrainian side of this defense belt. On this video we see the Russian infantry entering the farms under the fire of FPV drone, let's say, forces of armed forces of Ukraine. And today different mappers continue updating, showing additional progress of the Russians. For example, Syria confirms that the Russians managed to establish control not just over those farms, but over the farms that located to the southwest. So over this one that we, for example, if you remember, yesterday I told you that I have some doubts whether the Russians managed to capture this. For now we don't have any geolocations confirming this, but very likely this is also the progress. Furthermore, during the previous night we got additional updates from Orlovka itself, from the central part. On this video, for example, we can see the Ukrainians were filming the area, the building that according to them was populated with Russians, and as a result of strike the building was destroyed, and basically with the Russians. So this is approximately by geolocations the edge Russian position. So the further movements we can see. And when talking about Berdichi, we have just one video. We have once again adjusted the map. On this video video, we can see the Russians, according to the author of this video, we can see the Russian soldier, this is it, and we can see the Ukrainians who were hiding behind the wall, and they ambushed the Russian soldiers, and we understand what was next. So according to the video, the Russian was moving along the street this way, from the western part to the eastern part, and from this area, the Russian soldier was ambushed. This video confirms additional Russian progress, and according to this video, we can make a conclusion that the Russians control something like this, let's say by the morning of the 9th of March. So of course the Ukrainians, when they ambushed the Russians, were using probably this road, Central Street. They entered the territory, and from these, let's say, from these buildings they attacked the Russians, but it doesn't matter. The most important is that the Russians are moving further to the west, and with the same speed, with the same, let's say speed of developments, so very likely the Russians are going to establish control over this line very soon. Now we are moving to the south, Donetsk direction. We have additional reports from the Avdiivka tactical bridge. During the previous night, the Russians published additional videos of fabbing the village by the name of Rovnopol. As a result of strike, few Ukrainian positions were heavily damaged by FAB 250, and this is very important because during the previous month, February, the Russians managed to establish control, according to some mappers, over the main road, over this stronghold, and to cut basically the supply between Staromayorska and Rovnopol. And now we see the Russian attempts to suppress the Ukrainian positions in the village, and all these concentrations, all these attacks confirms the Russian plans for further offensive operation in direction of Makarovka and Staromayorska, where I'm not saying that this is the Russian primary target and primary goal, but they see that Ukrainians don't have possibilities to defend themselves. They have lack of forces or ammunition, so that's why the Russians think, why not use these opportunities for improvements of their own positions. We haven't received anything from Bakhmut Artyomov's direction. The clashes in this area continues. We have just one video from Siver's direction. The Russians were bombing Krasnohorivka with multi-launch rocket systems. Maybe the Russians do have some plans, but based on the concentration of geolocations, we can't make this conclusion. Maybe this is the first step of attacks that are going to take place in the next few days. So let's follow this area. Let's keep this area in our mind. The most important things are coming also from Cherny direction, and if you remember, we have already changed the map. In the previous version of the map, we had just this forest under Russian control, and today we have improved the Russian positions because we had received additional video. On this video, we can see the Ukrainian FPV drones of the 5th Azov Brigade were attacking the Russian forces in this area, the Russian Armored Fist, who was moving from, let's say, Russian positions towards the Zhiribets River. Lots of armored vehicles, personnel carriers were heading to Zhiribets River under fire of Ukrainian FPV drones. So based on the video, we have adjusted the map. The Russians were moving something like this, and the Ukrainians were attacking the Russians with FPV drones from Cherny, so something like this. So this is additional progress of the Russians. And now we're moving back to Robotyne. We have additional reports from the area. According to information we have, the Russians currently are bombing the Ukrainian positions in the eastern part of the village. During the previous days, the Russians managed to improve their positions in the fields between Verbova and Robotyne, and according to some sources, the Russians haven't stopped. They continue movements, and very likely the next few days we're going to see additional progress of the Russians in the fields, and very likely inside of Robotyne itself. So the situation develops not in Ukrainian favor. We have lots of interesting political events, let's say global events about the situation in Ukraine and around, and let's talk first of all about global Ukraine updates. According to information we have, currently the Ukrainians are considering to send prisoners to the line of combat contact. They try to find the mobilization reserves, and according to statistic data, the Ukrainians have more than 100,000 people in prisons. But the biggest problem of these 100,000 soldiers, 100,000 prisoners, is that most of them are was already on the line of combat contact, but they refuse to follow order, or these are people who support Russia, or these are people who just are criminals and something like this. So it's not very reliable resource. So that's why the Ukrainians try to find a solution how to use it, but for now they haven't found anything. Very interesting updates are coming from Nikolaev Kherson direction, and according to information we have, the Ukrainian armed forces have intensified aerial and satellite reconnaissance of Russian positions in the Kherson direction. Particular attention is paid to islands, spits, and coastal strips, and according to all these updates, we can make a conclusion that the Ukrainians have plans, or will try, and obviously they will try, to establish control over this part of Kherson. Why I'm telling this? Because we have few more updates confirming this information. First of all, the Ukrainians start building of another road in Nikolaev area. If we take a look at Nikolaev, we see that there's just one road, just one bridge that connects Nikolaev with, let's say, Odessa region, and now the Ukrainians are trying and planning to build another road, something like this, and the main purpose of this road is to increase the Ukrainian logistic possibilities in this direction. So they need to use Nikolaev port, they need to use Nikolaev itself, because if the Ukrainians are able to capture this part, this speed, and they probably can do this, and not just can do this, they can hold this area with significant number of losses. They don't care about this, and if they capture this territory, then they will be able to include Nikolaev port to the Ukrainian logistic and to Ukrainian trade process, global trade seed process. Furthermore, don't forget that the Russians, as a result of Ukrainian Navy drone attacks, were forced to fall back from the central and the western part of the Black Sea, and currently the main Russian fleet is concentrated in the eastern part, so it will be very difficult for the Russians to, let's say, counterattack or to block the ports of Odessa or Nikolaev. Furthermore, don't forget that yesterday Zelensky visited Turkey, and we have the video of how Turkish finished the building of another ship, battleship for the Ukrainians, which if they're able to move this ship from Turkey to, let's say, Nikolaev Odessa area, probably they will try to use it for, let's say, securing of the possible trade routes in this area. And furthermore, don't forget that according to information we have, France is going to redeploy forces in Moldova, with the purpose, if something goes wrong, to have fast forces of fast reaction and to send them to Odessa. So as we can see, for the 2024 military campaign, the Ukrainians are planning mainly to concentrate on Odessa, Nikolaev, Kherson direction, with the purpose to increase the Ukrainian, let's say, logistic and trade and finance possibilities, to involve the ports, to stop the clashes with Poland on the border. They need to move their logistic to the ports once again. So this is going to be their primary target for 2024, to secure the last, let's say, port in Ukraine and the last port area of Ukraine. Few more updates about Turkey and about the visit of Zelensky. If you remember that Zelensky was suggested to start negotiation process with Russia, and Erdogan was trying to be like in the middle of the process, but Zelensky refused to discuss any, let's say, peace negotiation with Russia, saying that we don't understand how it is possible to invite people who destroy everything and kill everything, Zelensky said in response to Erdogan's strange proposal, according to Ukrainians. So this is the situation. So we see that obviously there are going to be no peace agreement, but from the other side we got more updates from China and Switzerland. According to information we have, China and Switzerland are pushing for Russia to be invited to Swiss-held talks aimed on bringing an eventual end to the war of Ukraine. And so we see escalation. We'll see what is going to be next. And meanwhile, France is still preparing for a full-scale war with Russia. French troops are preparing for more military conflict on the territory of the European continent, French media reported. It is assumed that this will be a war with an enemy that can match France in manpower, in firepower. So we'll see. And the final update I would like to discuss with you from Moldovan border. Another batch of Ukrainians tried to cross the border. They were running so fast to the border of Moldova, trying to cross the area and to enter the free democratic world, but they were captured somewhere in the middle line, in the middle of the way, by the Ukrainian detachment and were sent probably back to Avdiivka. So the mobilization process in Ukraine is ongoing, and thousands of Ukrainians are being captured all over the entire Ukraine with the purpose to send them to the line of combat contact. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.